Welcome to Placecast, a local policy innovation partnership hub production based at the University of Birmingham. Placecast is essential listening for those keen to explore the ins and outs of knowledge mobilisation for influence in central and local government, based on the view that it is only through animating the power of place-based leadership that the wicked problems of 2026 can become more manageable. Whether you're a researcher, a citizen scientist, an activist, a professional working in the public sector, a civil servant, politician, analyst or entrepreneur, we think that it's through our networks the most solutions can be assembled, tested and the learning shared before we go again, and that universities can act as the repositories and observatories of these efforts. We are based in City-REDI and rooted in the LPIP programme funded by the ESRC and Innovate UK. This podcast aims to highlight knowledge and evidence-based ways of working and the strategies needed to make a real impact on the decisions that shape our society. Our guests are change makers from across the UK with stories about the ways in which influence can be achieved. We focus in particular on some of the connective tissue within and between sectors for clues as to how to animate place-based leadership, as innovating is a team sport best done in the open.
My guests today, one of them is local economic development royalty, and one of them is a rising star of the Institute for Economic Development. So, Richard Jeffery, you're royalty, if you don't mind.
I was going to wonder which was which.
So you've worked at the regional, national and local level, I guess, in your career, always in very senior roles. And you're currently the national manager of, if you could just explain the way the Growth Hub is a national organisation. Tell us a bit about that. You've got roots in GM, but you're national now.
Great to see you. Great to be part of this. A very thorough introduction there. So brilliant to be part of that network, believing all of those aims. My name is Richard Jeffery. I'm the National Director at GT Insight. We're a consultancy firm that's part of the Growth Company, headquartered in Greater Manchester, but operates across the whole of the UK. We're a social enterprise. We're all about enabling growth, creating jobs, improving lives. And we have a whole range of different services that we provide. One of them is the Growth Hub that we provide in Greater Manchester, but we also coordinate the national Growth Hub network across England. But we also do work across the Scotland and Northern Ireland and a whole range of other areas. And we have consultancy teams, we have data teams, which I think we're going to be touching on quite a bit today. We have Growth Flag, which is our tool that identifies companies with the greatest growth potential. We have a whole range of other performance tools and a whole load of other delivery activities. And we work for combined authorities, local authorities, etc., across the whole piece. So hopefully we'll be able to have some answers to some of your questions.
And I think it's fair to say, Richard, that you're known for almost relentless optimism in what can be a very difficult policy space. How have you come to be so upbeat when the policy area can be so challenging?
I think that's a fair point. I think we've had a number of transitions over the years, haven't we? There's been moments when I think many of us in certain aspects of economic development, I've largely focused on business support, done things, but largely focused on that. And that's had some pretty challenging times over the last 20 years. But I think what I've always found is that no matter how kind of challenging, say, a national policy landscape might be, a funding landscape, is that if you're really, really clear on what you want to achieve, if you can set an exciting vision about what you want people to buy into, and you can have a plan and prove that you can get there, and you can coalesce people behind that, you can achieve great things. So when we set up that first Growth Hub, there wasn't a lot of funding around. There was hardly any funding around. And yet we got people to buy into a vision. And it took us a few years to get there. But eventually we managed to get a whole range of different partners buying into that, getting behind that. And we went on to achieve some really great things, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. I think you can always achieve stuff, no matter what the landscape is, if you've got an exciting enough vision. And for me, that kind of, if you've got that rallying point for people to get behind, that people can buy into and see the benefit that it brings, great things can be achieved.
And of course, a big part of that is bringing on colleagues. I know you're very good at that too. So Nathan, less long in the tooth than us, but you've really come out of the gates firing with your chosen career. As I say, you've received national recognition, I see from LinkedIn all over the place on stages doing talks. So having fewer years under your belt, how do you find reasons for optimism in the subnational environment?
What we see every day is there are lots of opportunities out there. I mean, my background is more in helping people understand often confusing and complicated topics. And I guess the world of economic development business support certainly falls into that category. And I think often it's not necessarily the really complicated things, but actually the basics and the really simple things that actually, if you spend the time to look at them, there are lots of really exciting things going on, and there are lots of opportunities to make things better. And what we're all about, and what I love about doing this job, is that we're able to help people get those better informed decisions, to get those bigger positive impacts by pulling all that information together, whether it's the data, whether it's different viewpoints, bringing that all together and helping people unpick that is really important. And that's what gives us the optimism, but also empowers us and other people to drive that change.
I think that's right. And I think, again, full disclosure, the three of us have worked together closely over the years. So we do have a slight shorthand. But I mean, at times I am definitely more of doom and gloom persuasion. And the thing that really gives me hope at the moment is seeing the change in my own neighbourhood. My own 15-minute neighbourhood in Stockport is unrecognisable to when I moved up here 20 years ago. And that's the bit that keeps you, I think, hopeful and honest, is when you actually can track change in neighbourhoods. And sometimes it feels like with the national missions that things can seem very big and far away. But actually, if you are engaged in the craft of local economic development, you need to focus on the local. That's really helpful. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me today. As I say, I'll see you at UK Reef. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how UK Reef has established itself so quickly. They weren't in the built environment sector and they hadn't heard of UK Reef. I did reflect that in the last 5 years that we've had our own kind of national built environment jamboree over in Leeds. It's quite exciting to see in that period, if you think sort of the end of the last government and this government, the state of the mayoralties, for example, there's institutions that will be at UK Reef that didn't exist when UK Reef was set up. And I think when you're in it every day, you forget that pace of change being so fast. So I just wonder if you would like to reflect a little bit on the state of the art in the mayoralties and the state of art within local government reform and Devo, if you would like to say something about those things.
We've got some really good examples, haven't we, around the country of people who've been doing this for some time now. I guess one concern I had when we started down this process of everybody has a mayor, get a CA behind them and get going, was that there was a lot of people looking to some of the more established areas and saying that's how you do it. Every area is different though. And there was always a question mark to say, can that be pulled off elsewhere? I think I've been really heartened to see how those who've come in the second wave and third wave of CAs and mayors are really starting to gain some traction and get some maturity. It is not an overnight thing though. I think that can look at some of those who are now perhaps been around 5, 6, 7, 8 years, who are really starting to gain traction and really starting to do some serious work, that have got the local partners behind them, got the people there, and it is having a genuine impact. And I think it takes a while to get there. I think there's an awful lot that can be learned from other areas. Don't forget, there's lessons to be learned across that piece. You can get there quicker if you lean in and get that support that you need to go through it. But I'm incredibly heartened about what can be done. And I think it's just the right geography in many cases on which to operate. You know, I've tried to do things at a national level really, really hard to design something in Whitehall that you then land in Pontefract. Don't know why I picked Pontefract, but you know, that deals with everything you need to do with a business. Say it's much easier to start at that much more local level. Start with what that business needs and look at the environment it's in, look at the people that are around it, the infrastructure, the support systems. And to do that at a mayoral level is just a whole lot easier to do, even than doing it at, say, Northwest level. That was tough. I did that for a while, but it makes sense to geography. So that's the first thing. B, I think it builds in a lot of stability as well. So as you get change national level, we've seen a lot of change over recent years. Who knows what's going to come down the track? But having those mayors in place gives a lot of stability to give some of that long-term stuff, because the things we are tackling require long-term and require stability. So I think that's really pleasing to see. And then bringing it back to kind of UK Reef, starting to see the way that places are articulating their offer. is really good to see. And we've helped a number of areas around the country kind of really articulate what that means. So it's just beyond that brochure of, hey, we're great, come here. It's getting right into the nub of what is unique about their place, what is really special that genuinely interests investors, genuinely interests people across other parts of the UK and internationally. So I'm really looking forward to UK Reef. It's exhausting. I need to get a new pair of more comfortable shoes for it. Getting ready for that and making sure you've got all the meetings in that you need to see. And there's a lot of people want to see. It's a great event, and I think it's fantastic that it takes place in the north of England.
The best thing about UK Reef, you heard it here first. If you come out of the station, go to the back entrance and go on the water taxi with some guys from Venice who then serenaded me all the way to UK Reef. I mean, it was amazing. Nathan, as we were saying, you've been in the game a couple of years. What's your take on the mayoralties moving at different speeds? Do you feel, as Richard does, that they're maturing kind of nicely? Is there any sort of standout places that you've worked with recently? Any kind of grounds for optimism in terms of the sort of subnational?
Yeah, and I agree with Richard. I think the key point is these things take time. Quite often, the sort of patience for different things and patience for growth isn't necessarily there, but it's really important that you have those long-term plans. I think when we look at places, and we've been doing research into it through the Growth Outlook report, the places that are actually doing really well in terms of growth are those ones that have that really strong messaging, that long-term plan, and that infrastructure in place. I think when we look at where we're getting to now, yes, they're coming along at different speeds, and I think that's natural. There's potentially a bit of a concern and challenge in different areas at the moment in terms of because of the speed that some of those are going and the differences, some areas are going to get quite different outcomes to others over the next few years. So there's a real challenge there. But as you sort of said, I think UK Reef brings along a really good opportunity, and every year bringing those people together, it shouldn't just be once a year at UK Reef, but actually throughout the year. Some of the stuff we're doing increasingly is bringing those people that are working in the sector together, because actually we should be learning lessons from lots of different places, whether we're a mayoral area, whether we're an area that's on priority for devolution, whether there's a long way off devolution. Actually talking to people in different parts of the country, learning those lessons and building those connections ahead of time of what's coming down the track is really important, and UK Reef is perfect for doing that.
The main thing we're going to talk about, as I say, we work together on the data that sits behind Growth Flag. I presented a bit of your Outlook data at a summit in Birmingham last week, as I discussed earlier with Nathan. So if you could just maybe say something about how you're using Growth Flag at the moment. And Richard, you mentioned mayoral geography. I think what's really fascinating about the high growth geography of Growth Flag as you've matured, as it's matured, it certainly shows the Solihull example, top 7 local authorities for high growth propensity. And that isn't your core city, but it is able to benefit from some of the spillovers from the core city. So in a sense, if you just start with saying, what is the power of Growth Flag? And if it were fully mature and embedded and everyone was using it, what could change as a result?
The reason why we created Growth Flag was that we'd got a whole range of the tools that we had access to. But when I was there at the front end trying to work with growth businesses, understand the local area, trying to get into the right businesses at the right time early on in their journey, I realised that we just weren't getting to enough of them early enough. So, and those that we did, great, we did amazing things with. But there were others that we got to just too late after they'd raised finances, spent some money, not quite got in the right direction. So really keen to get to people early. And I think when we went through that process of creating Growth Flag, we got a tool that ultimately we were going to use just for us. Over time, we realised the power of this tool, and we really wanted the economic development community to benefit from this. And so the way that we are using it, the way that others are using it is really diverse. I'll talk about a few and I'll let Nathan pick up on some others. But the original reason for creating Growth Flag was to improve business support delivery on the ground. And that is 100% how it is being used. So a whole load of people have got it embedded into their dashboards to make sure they're really well informed when they see a client. They've worked out a clear strategy of who they want to go and work with. They've got that ability to assess that client or assess people as they come in, and to really make sure they've got a properly stratified, properly segmented view of what their business base is. And so that frontline work, 100% there. I think where it's really exciting is how it's been embedded into development of strategies, so that places aren't just sitting there going, right, default, we've read a national report that says it's just about high growth in certain sectors, we're going to go after those. They're able to make their own view of what their own priorities are. And yes, there's high growth, but we can also look at all stages of growth within Growth Flag to look at what that pipeline needs to look like. And I think they can take that broad range of objectives that they've got to say, how can we work with our business community to achieve growth, to improve productivity, to improve the lives of people living and working in our local area, improve health outcomes, improve all those other things that if you've got a thriving business base, many of your policy objectives are achieved. Something I think we've kind of lost a little bit of focus on, actually. Thriving business base solves so many other problems. So being able to have a tool that enables you to do that better is the cool thing. So my vision, my hope is that more and more places use that to really have a solid approach to reimagine how they can do business engagement and business support, to reimagine what growth looks like in their area. And we know, there's a bit of a segue here into it, Nathan, we know that different places have different growth characteristics. And actually it has massive ramifications for what they should be doing. It is not an identikit approach that people should be applying in their local areas. Yes, I was involved in some of the things we did in Greater Manchester, but we've done a lot of work in West Yorkshire and Liverpool and lots of other places. It's unique things that need to be done in each of those places. And Nathan's come up with a very fancy way of assessing that enables us to then look at areas and what different approaches they should be taken. So there's a bit of an introduction to bring Nathan in. I think it's worth just talking a bit about the growth outlook and some of the different ways you can look at a local area.
We share a frustration about sometimes when government is talking to business, it feels very much high level. It's kind of treasury to big business, but the SME...
That's what drives it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And incremental gains, as they say, for SMEs, that's the thing that is going to really change communities and change kind of...
And have those macro impacts.
Absolutely.
One of the challenges has been business support has been marginalised a bit. It's seen as, well, it's lots of little micro impacts. Add them up, you've got huge macro impacts. You've only got to look at the Greater Manchester example. Recent evaluation showed a £500 million net impact on the local economy from the growth of that. That's a tremendous story and one to build on, and one where you can really get that long-term.
And of course, the frustration is you're never going to get the macro numbers that you want unless you do a lot of things in the micro. And that's sort of, I think, been split apart slightly annoyingly.
A lot of things, but done well. The days where we had money to be able to spread that and do lots and lots of different things and see what's stuck, they've gone. So we have to be really focused with how we're applying any funds that we do have.
So Nathan, we alluded there to your categorisation of different kinds and types of area. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit? It's not an economic geography people might be familiar with because it doesn't follow an economic geography designed to fit institutions. It's a true high growth geography, and it's truly about the business base that's really there. And I would argue that maybe a couple of years into Growth Flag, it would have been easier if it fit naturally to cities or naturally to any other kind, that had a lobbying kind of base, but it's purer for being a true economic geography.
Yeah, exactly. I guess first off, what are we talking about specifically? Growth Outlook, we've mentioned it. It's a report we've been doing for 3 years now. It's the UK's most comprehensive analysis of business growth potential at local authority level. It's quite different to other reports you might find in quite a few different ways. It looks at absolutely every business with one set of accounts. It looks at right across the economy, all different sectors. And quite often, as you said, we can take quite a narrow view depending what different narratives are. We don't do that. We look right across the board. It's looking forward, which again is quite rare. At the individual business level, we're the only ones that do that in the UK. Just because a business has grown in the past, it doesn't mean it's going to grow in the future. And we also know how growth happens has been shifting nationally and globally. That's why we wanted to take a new approach. And by doing a national comparison, we hope to be able to share some of that best practice and insights from other places. And that's exactly what we've done with Growth Outlook. So we look at every upper or single tier local authority in the country. We look at what is the distribution of growth potential in those places, what's that growth work, and also how risky is that growth likely to be.
And just to be really clear, the data that you use is up to the minute, and it's the kind of data that we'd use for lending rather than it's not secondary data, it's not scraped data, it's the data that lenders would use if they were making a decision about a business on paper.
It's based on main government data sets plus enriched with even more info. So yeah, exactly as you say. And what that does is it allows us to get a picture of what is happening right across the country and to do a bit of a breakdown, classifications, as you talked about, as to how different areas compare. And as you sort of alluded to earlier, in mayoral areas, between mayoral areas, but also within mayoral areas, it can be very different in one place to another place as to what that geography looks like. And it's often not the more trendy narrative of all your big cities, all your high growth sectors. Actually, a lot of the time we forget about the majority of the business base in the UK is in the sort of foundational economy. It's often not the really exciting stuff on paper that's grabbing the headlines, but actually, when you look at those businesses, how they're innovating, the stuff that they're changing and the impact they have on local people and local communities is really exciting. And it's something we should be talking about a lot more. This year, we highlighted in Growth Outlook some of the top 10 include places such as Perth and Kinross, Aberdeen, Southwark, Solihull, Telford and Wrekin, Ancient Newton Abbey in Northern Ireland, Oxfordshire, a whole mix of areas. And they're not necessarily your big cities. They're quite often close to your big cities. And within those regions, what they're benefiting from is that connectivity, that really strong messaging, that infrastructure. But actually, I think going around talking to them, so each year we go around these places to try and work out what is it that's really helping them click, because we want to share that insight and help other places replicate that. And it is that being really connected on their thinking and having that long-term view of things, I think does make a really big difference. It's often difficult to do that, but actually having things joined up, having that intelligence all pulling together and doing stuff based on what the actual evidence is really important. And still in 2026, we might be talking about AI and everything else every day, but actually a lot of the times we don't use data in many of our decisions, and places that do that can make a much bigger impact than those that don't.
There are still definitely gains to be found around doing things right and doing the right things. You're right. I mean, economic development has a bad rep for being interested in the bright and shiny rather than the foundational economy. But you don't think that they're not mutually exclusive, are they? You found that, wasn't it, 40% of your growth companies were operating in the foundational economy, so it's not a separate category.
No, and they have to work together to make either grow. And if you're going to get the growth in the frontier economy and some of those IS8 sectors, all of those clusters and those sort of really high-tech subsectors, they only work if you've got those supply chains and those businesses and those people and those jobs in the foundational economy that's there to support that. So if you turn off all the support to them, you're going to struggle to get the frontier working as well.
It's just a very important lesson to be evidence-led and data-led and then develop your policy accordingly rather than policy-based evidence-making or whatever, we sometimes see in this space. We would like to spotlight solutions then. So can you describe, either of you, from work you've done recently, something that really is working well? It can be growth flag being used in a place, or it can be something else. And what we find is, when we're talking about that, the sort of change, this story is normally it's either you gather the resources that you've got, but maybe the people were great, there was a political commitment, there was more of a longevity. We always tell the story that any fruit that Manchester is gleaning now in terms of actual comparative GVA has been 40 years in the growing of the trees and the governance structures are a long time coming. So can you tell us something that has worked well in the subnational space that you can think about recently?
I'm going to mention Greater Manchester, having worked there for quite a long time, but also many other areas as well. I think it's worth pointing out some of the differences and some of the lessons I think that can be learned kind of across the piece. And look, working in a place where there was relatively political stability for a long time. That is key. There was a mechanism in place for decisions to be made collectively, a commitment to the longer term. That is massive to get that right. Not everywhere's got that quite right yet, but it's getting there. Having clear plans, clear strategies, sticking to it, having a clear ask of government that is backed by evidence, etc. Clearly, GM's been doing that for a very, very long time. But it's really interesting to see how other areas are now starting to really nuance their approach. And West Yorkshire, some really interesting work taking place on how they're using clusters to their priority clusters to really drill down and focus some of their energy. I'll let others talk about places such as Tees Valley that have really embedded a strong data strategy into what they're doing. And I think that's really, really interesting. You've got other areas taking a very proactive stance to how do we become the beacon of AI adoption, starting to do some work up in Scotland on that, and some work in West Yorkshire, where they've really started to drill down to say, how do we make sure that our local area can actually seize all of the potential benefits and do it sooner. So a very sharp focus around some of those activities I think is interesting. I think the way that you've got the likes of, say, the Liverpool City region using some really intelligent tools to diagnose what businesses need, to benchmark what they need, and to have an integrated approach where lots of different partners can have a single view of a client. So I think there's lots of really good bits of practice around the country. But I think for me, a lot of it at the minute starts with getting the right data approach and the right strategy approach. And Nathan's been working with people across the country who've been doing that. So I don't know, Nathan, if you want to talk about a few examples.
There's been, as you say, lots of areas which have massively expanded what they're doing around data. Tees Valley and some other places in the northeast being some of those, and starting with sort of more of a strategy focus, but rolling that out to day-to-day delivery, I think has been really powerful. Likewise in the West Midlands, and also other areas in Scotland and down in the south of England as well. There's lots of places where that is starting to happen. There's still lots of work to do. And just because places are using the data, that doesn't necessarily solve all the issues. It's around how do we look at that data in other ways? How do we connect it to some of these other things as well? And you talked about how a strong business base can solve lots of other problems. In some places, I think that's really starting to come together now in terms of drawing those links between business outcomes and health and some other things. Increasingly, we're seeing sort of some of that national policy view looking more at the importance of the social economy as well. So there's a policy drive to do that. If local areas can do that more in terms of connecting their data across lots of different fields, just beyond economic development as well, but into other realms of public policy, that will be really beneficial too.
And there's another area, Nick, as well, that I think is really interesting, is starting to get a better approach to evaluation and using data to do that. So we're doing some really interesting work at the minute in South Yorkshire on the innovation programme, looking at how you can have a long-term view of evaluation, do live evaluation throughout the programme, not just deliver a programme for 3 years and then at the end go, come in and have a look at us and what did we get right, what did we get wrong, what we've all kind of moved on anyway, and people have gone and done other things, but doing it in parallel, getting really deep into the data as you go, but also doing deep dives throughout that. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's an often missed aspect of economic development, that getting a really good monitor and evaluation plan that you can implement as you go, I think we've come on leaps and bounds. And ultimately, at some point, you've got to go to Treasury to say, we want to do X, Y, or Z, and you've got to convince them. And having those arguments stronger is something I think we as an economic development community need to really up our game on.
And I think you're right, that notion that evaluation can be formative and generative, and also that pulls you away from government doesn't pick winners. Government should pick winners, it should pick them, but not arbitrarily. It should pick them on the basis of really strong data and really sound evaluation. And then everybody feels much more relaxed about government doing what only government can, which is crowding investment into, and yeah, no, that's very clear. I was just wondering then, what are you working on next that's really exciting you? We've talked about a bit of the networking, the whole kind of UK coming together at UK Reef. Well, that was what I was thinking about. The Mayoral Data Council, it made me laugh. They were at my old department, MHCLG, they had 5 jobs up for people that would UX on data. And I know that that's quite, those conversations are relatively well developed. Even when the government, well, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when they were interested in the Northern Powerhouse, the central civil servants held the data, and then we worked with places to see how they would respond to that data. The notion that there will be subnational agreed data standards, and it seems to put the conversation in a much more formative place for mayoralties, and which seems right.
I agree, and really excited about the work that's taking place on that. And I think to see those conversations taking place is just really heartening. And you go back to your original question about what gives me hope. It's things like that that give me a lot of hope, because if you get that bit right, you can drive so much other activity.
And it seems so obvious now that having an infrastructure of really sound data within the department to then lead its work in places is going to make the work in place better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you ask about what else we're kind of working on. I think using that data to create investment prospectuses, using that data to help inform what some of the skill strategies can be and how you can target businesses better within that. That's becoming a really big area of our work. Using it to create your sector plans and your sector strategies and your sector offers and sector narratives. Really doing a lot of work like that across the country at the minute, which is really, really interesting. And again, bringing it on sound, unique data is really key. What we're also doing, and this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit more, is, as you know, we've been experimenting a lot with AI. We've been identifying how we can create new tools, a whole load of tools that do diagnostics, that do a whole load of tools that help people go through an AI adoption process, a digital adoption process, a whole range of. But one thing that I've always been really keen on, and again, it goes back to some of the origins that we had when we were looking at creating Growth Flag, was how can you better inform advisors? How can you use AI to draw that massive information to help them create a better tool when they're going and seeing people? And we're well down the path now, doing quite a lot of interesting work in that space. So watch out for that one, because that's going to be definitely a future launch later this year, and very excited about what that can do, because I think what that can do is it can enable you to focus more limited resources on certain types of businesses where you want to have some of that face-to-face work, but also provide a massive support for others where you're not able to do it in quite the same volume because of the resource constraints that are just endemic in the system at the moment. So really excited about that, and look forward to coming on again and sharing a bit more about that.
And I'm not sure I want to interview your AI. I'd much rather interview you and Nathan.
Well, you'll certainly get me in, Nathan. We'll just be better informed because we'll have the tools.
And I guess the last piece of the jigsaw is then also using the growth data to inform decisions where the state can be leader of first resort. So like the investment fund, for example, that has always had such the idea that GM is able then to actually buy into high growth businesses in terms of their fundraising.
And there's been some really good practice around that, and some of the work that's been done with some of the angels networks, filling some of those gaps, has been really, really exciting. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of finance around. There are still some gaps on the way, but it's how you coalesce all those things together. But that's the subject of a whole other debate, I'm sure, Nick.
Absolutely. But also, I remember there was some research when we were working together about how you were talking at the beginning about giving people the aspiration towards high growth for an area. It's that sort of smell of the sea piece. And I think that there was research saying that people kind of got their idea about what was available from their accountant or from whoever else, but intervening with the full suite of kind of what's possible, lending options.
Absolutely, yeah. Right finance, right time, all of that stuff, yeah.
and making it that people wouldn't try to fund business growth off business credit cards. Nathan, what are you working on next? What's exciting you?
There's an awful lot going on. So I think last year was very much a year of strategy, both nationally for local places and for us in supporting what was going on nationally, local places, helping people understand industrial strategy, helping support local growth plans, and a whole range of other things. I think this year, for a variety of reasons, the emphasis is going to be much more on delivery. But at the same time, we're going through another transition period, it feels like, in terms of where different funds are at. Supporting local places. We're still in the sort of early stages of implementation in terms of the new national strategies. And also, as you said, devolution for different areas is at very different stages. So I don't think there's necessarily a single thing that is going to characterize the year. I think there's going to be lots of different things that we're going to continue working on. And I think amongst all of that is going to be helping people understand what do these strategies mean for their local places, because it means very different things for different places, whether that's industrial strategy, whether it's things like small businesses, or whether it be things like support for places with high economic inactivity, looking across really broad range of topics, supporting people to use data and other insights to make more informed decisions on those things. Certainly over the next few months, there's lots around UK Reef, before UK Reef, during UK Reef is, as Richard said, very productive one for the whole sector. And as that concludes, pushing on from there as well, picking up those conversations and looking at, we've come together, we've had these discussions, learned some lessons, what can we actually deliver? There's a huge amount coming down the track from government every week. Who knows quite where we'll be in 6 months or a year's time, but plenty of exciting stuff on the horizon.
I think one of the really key things at the minute is a lot of places need to get out of that year-to-year mindset, which we've been stuck in for a while now, to a place where actually a lot of places now have got a good line of sight of what the next 2, 3 and beyond years are going to look like. So we've got that, but I still see places operating as if it's a year-to-year rather than going, actually, we've got a 3-year and beyond plan that we need to put in place and crack on with it. And I think there's a big mind shift needed to really get some of that longer term thinking in place. I still am seeing too much short term reactive stuff. This is a chance to stand back and go, right, this is what we're going to do over the next 3 years and get a really deliverable plan together. And you might not have all the bits in place. You might not have view and sight of all of those funds. But if you've got a core, you can build from that and build your intelligence, build your data repository, build that understanding as you go along, and make sure that you're bringing those other partners with you. Set the bigger vision, and then you can achieve more and be ready to scale up for other activity as it comes along. And it's those areas that have got the core infrastructure right, have got the plans right, and that ability to go, yeah, we can do that when those opportunities arise, as undoubtedly there will do, not just from government funding, but from other corporates coming in and backing business support and other activities. There are lots of opportunities there, but you've got to get your core fundamentals right, and you've got to be ready to put your hand up and go, we can do that, and scale it quickly on your terms as well.
So having said all of that, we're talking about quite a specific set of skills that are needed to work in economic development and place leadership. So I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on specific people who have that kind of can do, no will, no, can go on the scope at scale, can crack on. And I've got them here written down as brokers because they're taking something that's done somewhere else or knowledge from somewhere else, importing it into a place. Can you think of anybody who's really good at that kind of brokerage function that you've come across? They don't have to be working right now in the UK, but who's able to add policy to data, to strategy, and then, as you say, put the car into drive.
So I'm going to go big picture on this one. I think you've got to look at what some of the Metro mayors are doing at the moment and their senior teams. I think they are driving so much activity at the moment and getting on the front foot and really being kind of proactive. The Liverpool City region really starting to pick up that mantle and looking at some of their strong international links, looking at really clear plans around some of their higher growth areas. You've got West Yorkshire doing similar activities. You've got a lot of collaboration amongst those mayors, especially around the north. I think other areas have got things to pick up on. So I think I'll look at those types of people, so it's mayors and their senior leadership teams that are doing some tremendous work and really being open, I think, to learning from one another as well. So I've kind of ducked the question a little bit by calling out individual kind of names, and because you name one, but I think you've got to look, and maybe Nathan can come in, but if I am going to call out names, I've got to look at some of the IED winners, as your economic development winners over the last few years. Of course, Nathan's one of them. But it was the category of younger folk coming through that gave me, again, a huge amount of hope. People who were really passionate about what we're doing, kind of got on the front foot. Economic development, it's not the easiest life choice, skill, pathway to go down, but it's a hugely rewarding one. So for me, I'd be looking at some of those folk coming through on not just Nathan, but the other people who are in that category, is to say some of those people have got some really smart ideas and doing a whole load of great work.
And I'm quite glad, because obviously I've known Tom his whole career, and the fact that he's always been an IED person and is now the chief executive of Manchester City, I think that speaks very well to us. Well, Nathan, I suppose it's you. You're a good broker. Touch with that cohort. Is that a meaningful thing to you as you're starting out in your career, that you've got all those ideas to kind of draw on?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, I think I'd probably take it slightly different direction to Richard in terms of, yes, you've got absolutely those mayors and people in the top teams in those areas which are driving really important stuff. But actually, and I think I've talked about it in a few talks over recent years, quite often there's not the value put on connectors that there needs to be. Sometimes that can be business support advisors, sometimes it can be people in universities. I think people that are just embedded in local ecosystems are absolutely crucial. And I've been involved in a number of different co-working spaces, and they can be really powerful when you get a community like that together, both the members within them, but actually the people that not necessarily got the background in economic development or that major policy focus, but actually the people that are there day in, day out to connect people up to each other, to make somewhere a welcoming place to work. Because actually connecting those businesses and helping people work together and broker those connections in local places, that can make a really, really big impact. And as we said earlier, lots of micro things turns into something macro. Yes, absolutely the leaders, but also I think people on the ground in local places as well that are there doing stuff, connecting people up, really important not to forget them too.
Just to add one more thing, I was with the Growth Hub Network the other day, and there's people that have been through so much change over so much time, and yet 10 years on, for some of them getting on for 15 years now, they've just kept going with a passion to pull people together, to pull networks together and make change happen. So I'd say that whole network, massively kind of under-celebrated network of people running growth hubs across the country, they are real superheroes in my eyes.
And the Growth Hub Network, you're absolutely right. It doesn't leap to mind always, but you're right. They're doing the brokerage and the networking
Cracking on with it.
in their DNA, isn't it? It's what they do. So you've already shouted out the mayors. We've spoken a bit about the Mayoral Data Council and other things. Can you think yourself of a really good place leader? Not necessarily someone that you've worked with, but somebody that you're aware of. Who would you give the flowers to?
I'll let Nathan kick off with that.
That's a very good dodge, Richard. Equally, I think I would probably also inclined to dodge the question because, as you say, there are quite a few that you could go for.
You are amongst them kind of day in, day out, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so hard to call out any one team. You've got Sarah and the team over in West Yorkshire doing some amazing work there. You've got Simon Reed and Janice and others doing some really interesting work in Liverpool. I've been really impressed by the teams up in places like Gateshead doing some really on-the-ground work, making it happen, driving forward activity. People like Helen Lee up in the North East. So all these people, because it's no one person that's going to change the whole thing. It's that network of people making it happen. I'll give you some names there.
You've done very well there. Suddenly it all came tumbling out. Just to finish, I'm going to let you have a wave of my place-based innovation magic wand. Be careful with it because it has powerful magic and can grant you a wish. You have absolute power to do one of these things or anything else, but you must use your powers to make a tangible change to a specific place. Your change will be specific, measurable, actionable, recordable, and transferable. Smart. Magic is hard to get hold of at the moment and is subject to a 20% reducing multi-year budget settlement. You can have growth flaggers. You can have £10 million as a project fund. You can have half an hour with the cabinet and, I would say, one of Nathan's beautiful slide decks. You can have editorial control of the front page of a tabloid. You can have a clause to insert into a bill, so a legislative route. Something simple to go viral on the socials. You can have anyone as an advocate for this work. And then this is one academics often go for. You can have the answer to something that's always bothered you that you think would unlock it. Any of those leap to mind as useful?
We like to confer. So, I mean, you're not going to go for the money on that one because that's not going to
Money
change
comes and
everything.
goes.
Social media, well, we do that all the time anyway, and have an ability to get things to take it off from the best from you. So I often think it would be great to get a bit of time with the cabinet open to what life is like kind of on the ground and how you can practically achieve change. Whether you could do it in half an hour or not, I don't need to certainly practice that one. But if I was going to pick one, that's one that certainly kind of intrigues me.
It'd be very interesting to see the level of data kind of literacy actually within the cabinet. Nath, which would you do?
I'd probably do the same too. And I think it's because of that point there around data literacy in general. I think money doesn't solve these things. Actually, what we've been doing an awful lot of over recent years is helping explain to people why they should be doing these things in terms of using data and using evidence to make decisions and helping them to do that. So putting some money there doesn't really solve that problem. It's actually around building those relationships with people, helping them understand what the value can be, showing them where it has worked really well, and how we can drive that forward for national growth. Because if you roll that out on a national level, the impacts would be really, really big.
So, Nick, when's our time slot?
Yeah, it's at 4:17. You've got to go now.
I'm in. We're in. We'll go.
I'd love to know about a sort of cabinet away day and kind of what new intel they do apprehend. I know they've got a lot on their plates, bless them. Thank you so much for joining us. We set out in Placecast to mine insights from experts, that's you pair, real-world case studies, their work all over the country, and practical tips and career advice. I'm not sure about the career advice, apart from get alongside the young network in the Institute for Economic Development, and to spotlight solutions, such as Growth Flag, as well as wave the place-based innovation magic wand to get us into cabinet with data-led view of high growth potential in the UK. And we have. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.